الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Welcome to our show, The Voice of Islam, the dynamic and spiritually stimulating show about Islam, brought to you by Muslims who believe in the Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmed. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community has tens of millions of Muslims for peace in over 200 countries. Our motto is love for all, hatred for none. My name is Mariam, and I'm here with my co-host Arfa. Assalamu alaikum, Arfa.
Walaikum assalam.
I'm super excited to spend the next hour talking about real issues and Islam's perspective on them.
For our listeners who want to learn more about Islam and its teachings through the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, you can go online to trueislam.com. That's trueislam.com. You can also check out our Facebook page, Voice of Islam Radio Show. And for those of you who would like to talk to someone or ask questions directly, call the number 1-866-YISLAM. Again, that's 1-866-YISLAM. For any questions or comments, feel free to email us at voiceofislamradioshow@gmail.com.
So since 1889, our community has condemned all terrorism and strives without violence to establish peace and educate the world about the true teachings of Islam.
Yes, and as many of you may already know, this month is Women's History Month. And throughout the month of March, the achievements of women are remembered and celebrated. And honestly, I think it's so amazing to see how much change women have made and are continuing to make in our world. And actually, a few recent examples that I can think of just this year are that a historic number of women were sworn into Congress. There are 2 women who actually won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. And then, of course, we can't forget our first ever female vice president was elected into office, which is amazing.
Exactly. And those are really great examples. I think they're all fresh in many of our minds, and they're super empowering. And, you know, as we know, women contribute to society in so many ways. Some even make it their life's work to try and make the world around us a better place. So for today's topic, we thought it would be great to shine a spotlight on some of these women and the causes that they serve. So that our topic for this month is women who give back, and specifically those who give back to those less fortunate or those who are in need of help. Actually, one of the cornerstones of most world faiths is to actually serve the poor and needy. And this is exactly the case in Islam. In our holy book, the Holy Quran, in chapter 2, verse 275, God says, "Those who spend their wealth by night and day, secretly and openly, have their reward with their Lord." And in fact, I don't know if our listeners know this, but one of the 5 main pillars of Islam is something called zakat, which is the Arabic word for charity or almsgiving. So this is a religious duty that all Muslims who have wealth, that they can then put aside and give to the poor to try and equalize that.
Yeah. Well, our guests today not only give back to those less fortunate financially, but have also dedicated their time, leadership, and skills to others in need. So I'd like to introduce our first guest for today, Nusrat Saleh. Nusrat Saleh has been a volunteer with an international nonprofit organization called Humanity First USA. She's been involved since 2006 and currently serves as the Vice President of Finance. She's also a CPA and works for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. She has 2 kids and resides in Virginia. Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So for our listeners who are not familiar with Humanity First, could you please tell us how it started?
Sure. So in 1992, the concept of Humanity First came from the 4th Caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmed, may God's blessing be on him. So at this time, there was extreme frustration with the Somalia crisis. There was this horrible humanitarian crisis happening, and our community wanted to help, but we were having a hard time sending supplies and money to the people that really needed it. So our caliph at that time wanted our community to look at the way Red Cross had been established in all these major countries and to establish our own independent entity, which would work under the guidance of our community and serve others with justice and without any discrimination. The intent was to involve any noble soul that wanted to join this organization. So Humanity First was formally established in 1995 in the UK, and our entity here, Humanity First USA, became registered in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And by the grace of God, Humanity First is now registered in 58 countries, and this number is constantly growing.
Wow, so it's really similar in a way as to the Red Cross. Like where it was started by the Christian faith, but it serves and includes all people, right? So what is the specific mission of Humanity First?
So Humanity First USA is a disaster relief and a human development organization, and we are working with the world's most vulnerable populations, with the goal being to alleviate suffering as much as possible. So we started off, as we developed as a disaster relief charity, we learned that helping people survive wasn't enough. We needed to help them thrive, strengthen their capacity to help themselves, which is why we put a lot of focus into human development projects as well. So our main project areas, we do disaster relief. We also food security, global health, gift of sight, knowledge for life, and water for life. So we're doing these projects in the US, and we also have projects going on all over the world. Just to name a few of the countries that we do projects in: Guatemala, Burkina Faso, Mali, Liberia, Tanzania.
Wow.
And I'll just briefly, touch on each of these program areas just to give you a sense of the type of projects we're actually doing.
Yeah, of course.
So, one, disaster relief. We have served those in need in multiple earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, both here in the US and abroad. In the US, just recently, in 2020, we launched our HF We Care campaign for our COVID response efforts. We've been able to partner with over 40 different organizations as part of these efforts, including the Red Cross, food banks, local governments. So as part of our COVID relief efforts, we distributed meals all across the nation in 27 cities. We had a Make a Mask campaign where volunteers were making non-surgical masks. We helped coordinate drives. And we also gave free tutoring to students.
Wow.
So our second big area, and especially here in the U.S., is food security, serving those that lack consistent access to food. So in the U.S., we're continuing to operate around 20 pantries across the country to help in this area. Next is our global health. So we are trying to not only provide healthcare to those underserved communities, but also to build the capacity of the local healthcare system and the professionals in the countries we work in. So again, we partner with several organizations, hospitals, such as Johns Hopkins, for their expertise and their professional volunteers. Our biggest project in October 2018, we inaugurated the Nasser Hospital in Guatemala, a 27-bed hospital.
Wow.
And the goal is to have this hospital be sustainable on a long-term basis, generate enough income to cover its expenses, but also to be able to provide free and discounted healthcare to those that can't afford it. So since opening, Nasser Hospital has served over 21,000 patients. Wow. A lot of people and a lot of people we know have gone on our medical missions where we have medical professionals from the U.S. go to other countries, provide free basic health services to those that can't afford it. We also have surgical missions, same concept. We're performing much needed surgeries on patients. And an important part of this mission is to provide training to the local doctors in the countries we're holding these missions. We also have gift of sight. Generally, we have an annual gift of sight mission. So U.S. doctors are traveling. They usually go to Guatemala to perform cataract surgeries. Again, we partner with organizations, hospitals. Typically, this mission partners with Loyola University. And with these missions and other eye camps that we've done in some of our other countries, by the grace of God, we were able to perform 360 surgeries in 1 year, literally give 360 people the gift of sight.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing. So actually, I had a quick question. You mentioned, the gift of sight, how you obviously would have doctors, optometrists go there. Now, are all these volunteers doctors or professionals in the field?
So obviously the people actually performing the medical procedures are doctors, but we have lots of non-medical volunteers going as well, because there's actually all these other logistical needs. So there's people checking in the patients, there's people doing inventory of the medicines and other things. So our missions include like a team of usually like 15 people. And there's definitely, probably 5 of those people end up being non-medical.
That's really great, because then it really gives the message that anyone can help if they volunteer their time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what are the biggest challenges your organization faces as far as fundraising?
So in terms of fundraising, I would say one of our challenges is just finding ways to expand our donor base. We are very fortunate. We have a very dedicated donor base, and when we ask for funds, they always respond. However, they have other financial commitments and obligations, so it's not always easy for the same people to give over and over again. So we need to really focus on expanding our donor base. So how are we trying to overcome this? We've been trying to expand our fund development team and marketing team to try to get new people in, join our team with fresh new ideas. One of our new ideas was a virtual dinner we actually just held earlier this month. We had dinner delivered to people's homes all across the U.S. at the same time. And we were all able to enjoy dinner together from our homes while we watched this live streaming program.
That's nice.
Yeah, which was for people, we basically had a program to cover all age groups. We had everything from a poetry to a Minecraft competition. So by the grace of God, it was a huge success.
That's a great way to bring the family together too, in a really good cause.
Yeah, and especially during the pandemic, if volunteers aren't able to go there physically, you're at least making up some funds over video or, a fun little trivia chat.
Yeah, no, I have a question as well about the organizational aspect. So did you find other organizations that are willing to partner up with you, for example, for this dinner? Were they able to help you in that way?
We constantly are, we built a lot of really good relationships. So yes, we have. And for our dinner, specifically for this dinner, usually the partnership we're doing for specific programs and projects, not necessarily as much with our fundraising events. But yes, we have a whole, slew of organizations that we've been able to partner with.
Oh, that's great. So another question I wanted to ask was, in what ways have women specifically contributed to the success of your organization?
So we have women serve Humanity First at all levels. We have women who are on our Humanity First USA board, multiple directors like me serving on the national level in different capacities, marketing, overseeing certain programs. We've also established a network of over 50 women ambassadors throughout the U.S. These ambassadors serve as champions for Humanity First USA in their local areas in terms of fundraising and then also carrying out local projects. So through this network, we have women identifying the needs of their communities and then overseeing projects to fulfill those needs. I'll give an example here in Virginia. We identified a need for a food pantry. So our local ambassador coordinated with us to get it up and running. Not only did she help get it up and running, she was able to connect with the local county. So we're getting free food to distribute most of the weeks. She also regularly, looks out for and identifies local grants to help us cover the costs of the pantry. So this has been one of our most successful ongoing pantries by the grace of God, distributing food every 2 weeks on a regular basis to over 100 families. And this is a mother with 4 young kids. Multiple examples of amazing women serving humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And also I mentioned, yes, wonderful. Also, we had our Make a Mask campaign, which I mentioned as part of our COVID relief efforts. We did this through a partnership with the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Auxiliary, in which we had over 400 women all across the U.S. at home making non-surgical masks for others. Our goal was to make 25,000 masks, and by the grace of God, we were able to provide over 30,000 masks to frontline workers and others that needed them.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. And those were really needed right in the beginning of the pandemic, when they weren't as easily available.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they had a shortage. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Wow. We were able to get that project up and running, within a month of the pandemic really hitting. We were able to act on it fast.
Wow.
I love how that it really caters to women, and not only women, volunteers of all skill sets. You don't have to be a career-minded person, or you don't have to have a very specific skill set. You just need to have the will and the time. I love that.
So also, we have projects that are specifically focused on women, empowering women. We've had women's health missions where our teams educate underserved ladies on topics like women's nutrition or pregnancy complications. They also provide screenings for things such as cervical cancer, pelvic infections. We also have certain vocational schools, such as sewing schools, to help empower women, teach them skills to help them better their lives and their families. So just last week, we had a really cool success story come out of Mali. We had, there was a team from a garments factory in Mali that came to our sewing center in Bamako. And the factory representative told us that they had won this huge contract with the government to make uniforms for hospitals, fire departments, and police. They went to several of the government sewing centers, but couldn't find a single person who was trained enough to hire. So he had heard about the Humanity First Sewing Center, so asked that a testing date be set up. So we had a testing date. 50 of our sewing school graduates came to take the test, and the factory representatives were so happy with the results. They had said in other centers, they couldn't find a single person to hire. They could have hired all 50 of the people that had taken the test, but they only had 20 open vacancies for now. So they filled them all with our HF, our Humanity First Sewing Center students.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's so great because it's like, you're teaching them the skill set that they have for a lifetime, that, they can actually continue, with these skills and earn, an income and all that. So, wow, that's very, very.
It's not like a one-time thing. So it's like something you helped out one time. It's going to hopefully help them build themselves and also empower them mentally, that they have this skill that they can use now to help their family. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's like that one quote, like, give a man a fish. And I'm not saying it right, but or teach a man to fish and he'll learn for a lifetime. So
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but
exactly. And so for Nusrat, how has working for Humanity First been rewarding to you, and what advice would you give to those who would like to get involved or just to make a difference?
So, Islam, our religion, teaches us over and over again to serve humanity, and doing so pleases God. So we grow up hearing we should serve in whatever capacity we can, and we will see the blessings of God for doing so. So I will say that I've always felt those blessings, and which is why I continue to push myself to serve, even when I wasn't sure if it made sense for me to continue. For example, when I started having kids or other family responsibilities increased, I kept pushing. The blessing and the fulfillment I've gotten from Humanity First, I've never gotten from any of my day jobs, even when I worked for a high-powered accounting firm or my current government position. There's just a different sense of fulfillment. And an added bonus for me has been that I've been able to use my education, my professional training to really help others. So another thing I would point out is I've been fortunate enough to meet some of the people that we have directly impacted. I don't travel as much as other people in Humanity First, but I have had the opportunity to go to Guatemala a few times. I've met the students that come to our school, seeing the excitement in being able to go to school, meeting the families that were benefiting from our water wells, how grateful they were, realizing, again, what I take for granted, and just realizing by just giving my time, what a difference it makes.
Yeah, I can only imagine how it feels to get that firsthand experience of how it's affecting someone's life. That must be so touching.
And to actually go to the country and see what they're doing. I think I've had a few of my cousin actually who went to Guatemala, and he goes every year now because he's had such an amazing experience, and he, it's really that like internal feeling that you get that it's just rewarding.
Exactly. And what advice could you give to other people listening in right now who want to get involved?
So we, first I would say volunteer. We are a volunteer-based organization. We always need volunteers. You can sign up as a volunteer on our website, usa.humanityfirst.org. I deal with all kinds of companies with my day job all the time. And every once in a while I step back and I think how truly amazing it is that we are running this $2 million public charity on a primarily volunteer basis by the grace of God. Also, we really need your ideas, fundraising ideas, ways we can help in your local communities. And I would encourage everyone to go one step further. Not only come up with an idea, but think of ways that you could personally help us turn that idea into a reality. And also, of course, our work could not be done without financial donations. We do try to stretch every dollar as much as possible. We have limited overhead, again, with the majority of us, being volunteers. And lastly, please spread the word about the great work that Humanity First does on social media, with your contacts, with everyone you know.
Oh, that's great advice. And also, is there like an age limit? How young can you be to start, helping with volunteering and getting the word out?
So, I mean, obviously, it depends on the type of volunteer work, but we have, kids helping us. It's a great way to get kids helping their parents do various activities. So, part of what we're trying to do, like in our dinner, the virtual dinner we just mentioned, we did this Minecraft competition. We're trying to get kids engaged at an earlier age, just the concept of humanity. So we did a Minecraft competition in which they built, and I don't know much about Minecraft, I'm probably going to use the wrong terminology, but they were able to create, they created their Minecraft worlds based on Humanity First projects. So again, just get them aware of Humanity First, the different work we do. And we have a lot of kids that help their parents in Humanity First work.
And how about when you guys have actual, like you were saying in Guatemala, you have people who volunteer their time. What would you say to people who have families? Can they volunteer their time and bring their children with them on those trips?
We have, I mean, obviously, we have to consider like the ages, but we have had, a parents bring their older teenage children with them to experience some of the missions and the camps, and it's a wonderful experience.
Oh, great. And then I did have another question. I know you mentioned so many, experiences that you've had. You've traveled there, you've helped out, at different places. Now, is there any specific incident or experience that you've had that's really personally touched you?
I think the first time I went, I probably had been already working for Humanity First for probably a good 10 years before I went on my first trip. And I think going to our school in Guatemala and, I just seeing like the conditions that you could tell the kids weren't coming from the best of conditions, and just seeing like how joyful they were for just to be able to come to school. And at that school, we actually, just in addition to just, providing like primary school education, we have like psychologists there, counselors also working with them. Like we're providing more than just the K through 12, the typical education. And we're also providing them meals. And in, a lot of those cases, it's like the only meal that they're getting. So, just meeting these kids and just thinking about how fortunate my kids are, it really touched me. And just, again, how grateful they all were.
Yeah, definitely. And how long were you on that trip, or how long
I usually, unfortunately, because of my own family, my own kids at home and work, so I usually just go for 4 or 5 days, a couple of days. I was fortunate. We as a family were able to travel for the inauguration of the Nasser Hospital there. So it was great for my kids to witness all of that, see that, and, like really understand like what, again, for us, Humanity First, my husband's also involved too. So it's a family thing for us. So it was nice for my kids to see, oh, this is what my parents are, actually spending their time doing.
A really good example for them. And I mean, last year was a really crazy year for so many organizations and businesses. Did you guys have any major challenges trying to get donations through the pandemic time?
I have to say, we actually were fortunate in that we did not have any issues. We actually had got more donations during the COVID time. We were able to, do a lot more projects in a lot more cities in the U.S. And so I think, our donors were so happy to see these amazing projects happening in their local areas that they were willing to be even more generous. So again, like I told you, we have this amazing donor database. We say, we send out appeals, like we're trying to do our COVID relief efforts. There's a lot of people that need help, and people responded generously by the grace of God.
I feel like we've seen this so many different times in the pandemic, where on one hand, people are going through a really rough time, whether it's, personally or financially, but on the other hand, people are really trying to kind of, be introspective and see what we could do to make a difference in the world. So I think a lot of people are trying to go back to work, during the pandemic.
Exactly. I agree. 100%.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nazar, so much for joining us on the show. That was a lot of amazing stuff that we heard today. And for those of you who would like to know more about this amazing organization, if you'd like to know more information on how to donate or volunteer, please check out their website, usa.humanityrfirst.org. Again, that's usa.humanityrfirst.org. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
So the amazing work that organizations like, as we just heard, Humanity First do, it's really inspiring and motivational for all of us. And, you know, we want to go and make a difference. And in this world that we live in, we're all trying to make it a better place in whatever capacity that we can. So the Caliph of our community, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmed, recently spoke about this, and he said, and I quote, "According to our abilities, we seek to feed those who are hungry. We seek to give water to those who are thirsty. And we seek to care for those who are sick or suffering in any way and to provide them with suitable treatment."
Yeah, and here His Holiness describes the way in which an ideal society should operate. Now, a society which is insensitive to suffering, to the sufferings of human beings, or really any of God's creations, and it is not acknowledging or even trying to serve humanity, can't really be described as a successful society.
Right.
This Messiah, peace be upon him, he linked this attitude of helping others with faith. And he said, serving humanity is in itself a form of worship.
Right. And when we think about people who are less fortunate than us, most of the time, many of us automatically start thinking of these extreme, you know, places with extreme poverty. Mm-hmm. And most of the time they're outside of the US, you know, they're the third world countries that we see on television. However, it's important for us to remember that charity starts at home. So mm-hmm. even within our local communities, we can find multiple worthy causes to support. And we've seen many examples throughout the pandemic, whether it's people donating laptops to help mm-hmm. low-income households to get their kids logged on into virtual school, or people mm-hmm. starting local food collection events to help families who've been financially impacted.
Yeah, exactly. There's food drives, clothes drives, you know, even like blood drives, you know, mm-hmm. any way that you can help, you know, is amazing. So, which actually brings us to our next guest. You know, we're going to be, they'll be discussing a little bit more about what they do locally. But before we bring them on air, I'd like to remind our listeners one last time to go ahead and visit our website, trueislam.com. Again, that's trueislam.com. And if you'd like to ask questions directly, you'd like to talk to someone personally, please call the number 1-866-YISLAM. Again, that's 1-866-YISLAM. For any questions or comments, feel free to email us at voiceofislamradioshow@gmail.com.
So our next guests for today are a mother-daughter duo, Tazeen and Mariam Ahmed. So in April 2019, they co-founded the Up to Us Foundation, a Maryland nonprofit addressing food insecurity in Maryland and Washington, D.C. So Tazeen serves as the organization's executive director. Last summer, she was named as one of the Maryland Commission for Women's 100 Maryland Sheroes for her work in distributing food to COVID-impacted families. She has been a lifelong advocate of issues of importance to women, and over the years has worked in leadership positions with many nonprofit organizations that serve women and children. Her daughter Mariam was the inspiration behind the creation of Up to Us Foundation. She serves as the organization's director of operations and is the one who keeps the wheels turning on the day-to-day operations. She's a fierce advocate for racial and economic justice and believes that it is everyone's responsibility to serve and support each other in order to make a positive change in our society. Both Mariam and Tazeen were Women Making History honorees for Women's History Month in Montgomery County. Assalamu alaikum, Mariam and Tazeen. Welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. It's really awesome to have you here, and I can't wait to get into the questions. So let's just get straight into it. Could you explain to us what the mission of your nonprofit is?
Sure. The mission of is really simple. We aim to improve the quality of life by providing dependable access to nutritious food to families in need. The reason we named the organization Up to Us Foundation was because we felt that it was up to all of us to address this issue. Food insecurity hits our most vulnerable families disproportionately, and too many Americans, unfortunately, don't know where their next meal is coming from. And we feel like this has to change. And as a society, we believe it's incumbent on all of us collectively to take care of those around us.
And for our listeners, can you just maybe explain what is food insecurity? What exactly is that?
Sure. Food insecurity is, basically it's the lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy life. And this can be a temporary situation for a household, or it can be something that lasts a lot longer.
Wow. All right. So I actually wanted to ask, what inspired you to start the Up to Us Foundation?
So for me, it's always been my goal to make the world a better place, like so many of us. But if I'm being honest, I never thought I would have co-founded a nonprofit. And that's just because I wasn't thinking that way. That's not something I even thought about or knew how to do. But I guess the idea in some ways slowly developed over time. And what actually inspired it for me was growing up in privilege. I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. That was not a question for me. As a kid, I never realized that in going to a heavily funded school in Montgomery County, Maryland, where kids, they come to school driving Mercedes-Benz, that same school has kids that can't afford lunch. And my first exposure to these huge obstacles that so many people face every day came from listening to Tupac and his music. So Tupac was an amazing artist, for those who don't know, and he was also a fearless leader who had a big voice. He always talked about what was really going on, and his honesty exposed me to a lot and inspired me to, educate myself growing up in privilege. So I worked towards that. And I wanted to make sure that I do my best to do something about the problems I see and hear.
That's really inspiring.
Cool. And I think that's really amazing, because a lot of times when you do grow up in these kinds of, in that environment, you said you were privileged and all that, a lot of times people forget and they overlook this huge thing. It's like, oh, it's not something that's in their life, so it can be overlooked a lot of times. So. Oh.
And sometimes, as you said, it can be right in front of you. Like you're saying, it's the same school you went to, but it's not always obvious unless you're looking for it. So it's really inspiring that you saw it and you felt something and you wanted to do something about it. So how did you start the foundation? Was it something that you decided and your mom kind of joined, or was it a collaborative thing?
It was definitely a collaborative thing. Like I said, I don't think in business terms at all. So community service has always been a part of my life, and I learned that from my parents. But one day, me and my mom were we were just talking about different projects we were working on, and then she thought, why don't we actually make this into something real and make it something consistent? And so that's kind of how it actually got started. And she thinks in more practical terms. So we together started brainstorming, okay, how can we actually make a difference? So we focused in on something, which was food insecurity, and focused in on creating a program, started small, and that's kind of how it started.
Well, it always takes one step, and then look where you guys are at now. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as we're discussing right now, a lot of the times, I think living in a country like the United States, we don't always think about, looking at home to start for charity. We always look at the big things, like, oh, look at that country, look at that country. So I really think that it's inspiring that you saw what was around you and you thought, let me make a difference. And I mean, just as me and you are saying this too, I think a lot of our listeners are probably in that situation where they might not realize what's going on closer to home that might need to be worked on. So in that line of thought, to maybe educate me and our listeners and everyone about this issue, could you maybe elaborate a little bit on this particular issue within the US about food insecurity?
Sure. So like my mom said, she defined food insecurity because a lot of people are not quite sure what that actually means. And what a food secure household looks like is a household that has at all times access to enough food for each family member to live an active, healthy life. A food insecure family doesn't have that for every household member. And of course, I mean, I think we're going to talk about it later on, but COVID has made a huge impact on that. And just to let you know, Feeding America has reported that because of the coronavirus, they're projecting that 42 million Americans may experience food insecurity this year in 2021.
Add to that, I just wanted to mention that, you know, hunger doesn't exist in a vacuum. And hunger isn't necessarily solved just by food alone. There's a lot of root causes that, you know, leave people in poverty and hunger. So I think that's an important piece to this puzzle of trying to address food security, is really looking to, you know, to have increased job opportunities, living wages, access to affordable housing and healthcare, and really putting an end to systemic racism and barriers that exist in our country and create situations where people are hungry and live in poverty.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that reminds me of a quote from the Prophet of Islam, who's Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, "The best charity is to fill a hungry stomach." And I think this is actually exactly what both of you guys are doing. You know, the work that you both are doing is so great and inspiring. So that's great. Another question we'd want to ask is, you know, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, you know, as a mother-daughter duo team, how do you actually split up the responsibilities between you both?
I'll tackle that first. So it's been a really great experience working with Mariam, and I think we complement each other really well. Mariam works full-time for the organization. She's worked full-time since its inception. And she manages all the operations, the day-to-day operations, which involves like a ton of work and a lot of organizational skills. But I think one important part of what she does is that she's our chief inspiration officer. She brings a vision of a more just world that's really at the core of what we do. I work more on building partnerships with government agencies, for-profit companies, and nonprofit and religious organizations to expand the scope and impact of our work. For example, in 2020, we were able to serve like over 40,000 residents, which were above and beyond our regular clients that we serve through the partnerships that we created. And and part of that was we, you know, worked with the USDA program, Farmers to Families program, that facilitated, you know, the distribution of millions of, you know, over 1 million pounds of food just last summer. And then the other piece that I do is I manage the business end of the organization. So that's, I guess, the strength I bring to the table. I think the one thing that I always need to work on is knowing when to stop working. To run into my night and Mariam to remind me that I need to take a break to balance things out. So I need to balance each other out.
Yeah, and just to summarize what my mom said, I feel like I'm creative and I'm kind of spacey. And my mom, she's like smart, business-minded, and organized. So I feel like it's a good combination. And also, if I'm going to learn from someone how to be a good leader, I'm glad I actually get to learn that from my mom firsthand. Like, obviously, day-to-day life, but then I also get to learn from her in business. So it's win-win for me.
You guys complement each other so well.
I know, right?
On a personal level, though, do you ever find that you kind of have to put your kind of personal relationship aside? Do you have to say, okay, we're talking business right now, so you kind of talk about the organization? How do you tackle that issue?
Okay, so I feel like, okay, my mom kind of said it. She's like more of a workaholic than I am. And so it's not that like, oh, like when we're talking about business, it's business, but sometimes it gets too much business. So we,
So
we
the
just have to
opposite.
balance that part, but
Yeah.
everything else is like basic. Like it's, that part is not
Yeah.
hard. Just about kind of remembering, okay, let's talk about something else.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So actually, now what's the advice that you would give to women or pretty much just anyone who wants to start up setting up their own foundations or just want to set up something for a good cause?
So my advice to women who are interested in setting up their own foundation is really do your homework. When you decide about a cause you want to support, research it and see what's already being done in that area. When we started talking about setting up a nonprofit to address hunger, we reached out to other organizations that were working on hunger and poverty in our area. And we also did a lot of research to identify what the need was for that type of service. We didn't want to start something, that there was enough need in that community. And it was quite. We were actually taken aback by the, how significant the need was, in a county that's supposed to be one of, better off counties in the country.
Yeah.
And then a couple other pieces of advice I think are useful and, hopefully will be useful for people. I think if you're considering, starting a nonprofit, volunteer with an organization that's already doing similar work to what you plan on taking on, because seeing what's being done is really priceless. And also it'll give you a realistic idea of what to expect when you, get started. And another important thing is, I think, to keeping in mind, accountability is really an important piece when you're receiving donations or grants, which you definitely need, unless you're personally funding the nonprofit. Running a nonprofit, there's this important business component which requires accountability and transparency. And finally, I'll just say, be realistic with your time. Nonprofits come in all shapes and sizes, so it may be something you can manage easily if it's a smaller project. But if you have more ambitious goals, just make sure you're allocating enough time to make it work.
Yeah. And actually, I wanted to ask, because I know you talked about, a lot of donations and grants that go into it. So now, did you have to use a lot of like your own money to kind of fund it, or is it all through donations, or how did you kind of get that running?
So it's a combination. So Mariam was working full time at it, and she was not taking a salary. So that was a piece that we couldn't have done it without having somebody dedicated to it. And that's not always possible for people because some people can do it, some people can't. And then we, the first year we had just family and friends donate, and when we ended up with COVID in March, obviously March of last year, there was, our county, and, I think a lot of agencies just started doing so much more. And we were thrown into this thing because we ended up getting county funds for a couple grants. So, we've been functioning with grants and then donations, but both, all of those pieces are really important pieces for us to continue our work. And then apart from that, we became partners with, a bigger food bank, which, and a few other organizations that helped us buy food at a discounted rate, and we got food as well.
That's really, really good advice and really invaluable for anyone who wants to start up something, because, they don't want to have to learn it the really hard way. So you're trying to give them some help here.
Yeah, like a realistic view.
Yeah, and have you encountered any specific obstacles or barriers that you had to overcome that could have almost like stopped you?
I guess for me it was time management. Because I have a day job, so all the work for the foundation is done after hours on the weekends, and especially with the when COVID hit, it just expanded so quickly. I think it took us by surprise how much work we ended up having to do and to keep up. And I guess another challenge we faced initially was being able to find a facility where we could work from, because I think the first almost a year we worked out of our garage. So everything was set up in our garage, and someplace people don't, or companies don't deliver to residential. You're trying to buy these huge quantities of food. And I remember one day I woke up and there was this 8 in our outside our house. It couldn't come up our driveway because we have a steep driveway, and needed to offload all the food. So that was challenging. And we were able to in November find a space in a close by mall. So that was, and I guess finally the only other thing we had was during the summer we had no problems with volunteers. We would put out a Sign Up Genius, and within a day it would be full of volunteers, and we had drivers that would come and deliver food. But as people started going back to work, that became a challenge to get regular volunteers, but we're sort of working around that as well.
Oh, that's great. And also, since you two are female leaders in this, did you feel there was ever any bias or any struggles you had as women, or do you feel like it's a pretty fair, even playing field when it comes to starting up a nonprofit between men and women?
Mariam, do you want to answer that? Or
I personally didn't feel anything about my gender in regards to this. No, I haven't. I don't know about you.
And I think the same. I mean, we ended up, if you go to any when we have had lots of meetings with other nonprofits and stuff, and when you go to these meetings with other people working in this field, you'll find that the majority of the people at the table are women.
Oh, wow.
So there was a lot of women in the nonprofit sphere. So, and yes, I don't think we ever experienced any bias in any way that was negative.
That's great to hear, and it's really uplifting actually too, especially with Women's History Month, to hear that really leading the field and giving back, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, as you mentioned before, you were saying about your mission was impacted by the pandemic. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how it was impacted?
Yeah, so our organization has grown very quickly since the pandemic hit. And that's because, so many people have lost their jobs, and even more people who never imagined being in the position they're in at now. They're in.
Definitely.
And so part of what makes food insecurity so difficult to solve is that the underlying causes that we've talked about, like poverty, unemployment, underemployment, food deserts within a lot of communities of color that cause inconsistent access to enough healthy food, they all connect. And now with the pandemic, it's like that times a million. Like there's so much more of that. But at the end of the day, the whole point of our organization is to say that if we don't at least try to fix this problem, no one else is going to. And that's why it's up to us. That's why we called it Up to Us, because it's our job to try, at least try.
That's amazing. And what about in terms of the logistical side, in terms of, how everything's had to be so sanitized and it's hard to handle food and all that, especially if you're distributing it? Was that part difficult to try and get out? And as you said, there's even more families who were in need. So how did you try to navigate that?
I feel like we had a lot of help, because with everything that's going on, the government and the county that we're in, they're very much, helping with this process. We get a lot of free hand sanitizer for our volunteers. We get, face masks. So I think that has been, I thought that would have been a problem, but thankfully that has not been an issue so far, because we've had a lot of help.
That's really good to hear. It's good to know when people need help. It's not been a huge hurdle in that way, and that's really just uplifting to hear as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, as we're wrapping things up, I did just want to ask you both, how can others help with your charity? If you can give any information about that, so our listeners can get some more information.
So I guess I'll start. If you're interested in doing something to help people who are facing hunger and you support our mission, I think the keys are educating yourself, raising awareness about the issue, getting involved in your community and volunteering. And obviously, we're based in Maryland. So if you live in Maryland, then, you know, we can always use volunteers. So you can visit our website and we'll tell you what that is. And then, of course, at the end of the day, donations do go a long way because they allow us to continue to fund our free food program for families in need.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for both of you coming on our show. Thank you so much for sharing so much with us. Now, for our listeners who would like to learn more about this incredible foundation, you can go to their website, up2usfoundation.org. That's up, the number 2, usfoundation.org. You can also check out their Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Up to Us Foundation. Again, up, the number 2, Us Foundation.
Please make sure to go to their website, as well as we spoke earlier with Nudred, to check out Humanity First USA's website as well and learn about all the good work that they're all doing. Also, just speaking right now to Tazeen and Mariam, it really made me feel inspired to tell everyone that you should look in your own areas as well. Definitely support them, but look in your own areas and see, can you do anything to push your local issues of food insecurity as well, and, you know, help each other out. You know, donate to the other causes, but see what you can do in your local communities too, because there might be issues that, you know, we can help with. And I think listening to our guests today, one of the biggest takeaways for me was that, you know, there's so much power that we have to help each other, and we just need to choose to use it. And that's really one great thing about charity and giving back. There's no one way to do it, no correct way to do it, you know? So, for example, if you aren't financially stable, you can donate your time. And if you don't have much time, you can donate money or goods and so on.
Exactly. And I like to end the show with a powerful quote from our promised Messiah, peace be upon him. He said, "My desire, my wish, and my objective is serving humanity. It is my job, my faith, my inspiration, and my way." Now, thank you all so much for listening today. Make sure to tune in next week at 2 p.m. for our next show of The Voice of Islam on KCAA. Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings of God be with you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.